Welcome Algebra 1 students. In today's video, we are going to be looking at dividing monomials. We've been working with multiplying monomials, and so now we're going to divide these monomials. And so before we get to that, let's just kind of do a quick little review of simplifying fractions, because part of dividing monomials, or really all of dividing monomials, is going to be the same idea as simplifying fractions. So if you had the fraction 3 over 6, what would that fraction simplify to? Remember, you're going to look for something you can divide both those numbers by. And so in this case, you can divide both 3 and 6. You can divide them by 3. And so 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And so 3 over 6 is the same as 1 over 2. Remember, if you have a fraction calculator, you can also do this on your fraction calculator to simplify these fractions. What would 10 over 8 simplify to? What could you divide both those numbers by? Well, we can divide them both by 2. And so in that case, then this fraction would simplify to 5 over 4. 10 divided by 2, 8 divided by 2. And what about 15 over 3? What would that simplify to? Well, both 15 and 3 will divide by 3. And so that would just simplify to 5 over 1. Or you could actually just write the answer 5. Okay, so these last three fractions that I have up here, all three of these simplify to the same thing. What do all three of these fractions simplify to? Okay, they are all equal to 1, because remember, whenever the number on the top and the number on the bottom are the same, you can divide them both by 3 in this case, and you get 1 over 1. Same thing with 6 over 6. You can divide them both by 6. Negative 28 and negative 28. You can divide both those numbers by negative 28, and again, you get 1 over 1. So we're going to be using that today as we start to divide these monomials. We're going to be using both of these ideas of simplifying fractions here. Also, I want to remind you about what we did when we multiplied these monomials. So if we had 3x to the fifth, y to the third, remember that is a multiplication problem. It means 3 and then 5x's and 3y's. So if we wrote that as a multiplication problem, this is what it would look like. Okay, what would 6x to the fourth y squared look like as a multiplication problem? Okay, it's going to look like this. You're going to have a 6 and then 4x's and 2y's. Okay, so keep that in mind, because this idea of simplifying fractions and this idea of rewriting things as multiplication problems, that's going to be kind of the foundation of how we divide monomials. So let's take these same two problems that we were just looking at, and let's write them as a fraction. Let's say we had 3x to the fifth, y to the third over 6x to the fourth, y squared. Okay, let's go ahead and write those as multiplication problems like we just did. Okay, so here they are. They're broken apart. We've got 3 and then 5x's and 3y's, 6, 4x's and 2y's. We are going to simplify these as fractions, but instead of trying to simplify it as one big fraction, we're just going to go piece by piece. And so let's start by just looking at the number part, the 3 over 6. If you were going to simplify 3 over 6, what does it simplify to? Well, we just did that problem. 3 over 6 simplifies to 1 over 2. You can divide both those numbers by 3, and they become 1 over 2. So in our answer, we're going to draw a fraction bar, and then we're going to simplify 3 over 6 and write 1 over 2. Okay, now we're going to go through and we're going to look at all the variables. So let's look at this group of x's right here. Now that's x over x. Now that is a fraction. It's the same number on the top as what it is on the bottom, because they're both x's. And so if it's the same on the top as it is on the bottom, just like when we had 3 over 3 or 6 over 6 or negative 28 over negative 28, that would simplify to 1 over 1. So down here in my answer, I can put times 1 and times 1, because that's what x over x simplifies to, is 1 over 1. Now, 1 times 1 and 2 times 1, those are still just 1 and 2. So I don't really even need to write down that 1 over 1. I'm going to get rid of it here. But let's go on to the next set. Okay, so the next fraction I'm looking at is x over x again. Well, x over x again simplifies to 1 over 1. I don't really need to write it down. Okay, the next group, x over x. That'd be 1 over 1 again. Don't need to write it down. Next group, x over x. That's going to be 1 over 1 again. Don't have to write it down. But now when I get to here, I have an x up here that doesn't have a match down here. So this x is a leftover x. There's nothing down here to match it up with. So that means it's not going to be 1 over 1. It's just going to be x. And so in my answer, I'm going to have this x up here that's from this leftover. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now let's keep going. Okay, now we've got matching up these y's, y over y. Okay, so y over y again, that'd be 1 over 1. I don't need to write it down. Y over y again, be 1 over 1. Don't need to write it down. But again, I have this leftover y up here. And since I have that leftover, it's going to show up in my answer down here. And so my final answer, I have from 3 over 6, I got 1 over 2, and then I had one x that didn't match up and one y that didn't match up. Now that seems like a lot of work, but we really don't have to go to that much effort. Really what we're going to do is we're going to start by simplifying whatever fraction we see, which in this case is 3 over 6. We simplify it to 1 over 2. And then we look to see where are there extras going to be. If we look at the x's, there's one extra x on the top. There were 5 x's on the top, 4 on the bottom. So that gave us one extra on the top. And so my answer, I put an extra x up here on the top. Same thing with the y's. There were 3 y's at the top and 2 y's at the bottom. So that means I'm going to have one extra y up at the top. And so that's why my answer would be 1xy all over 2. And so that's really what it comes down to when we're dividing these monomials, is to look to see which side has extras. So for this first problem, like you're going to see on my open math, we have y to the 5th over y to the 13th. So which side, the top or the bottom, is going to have extra y's? Okay, it's going to be the bottom. And so that's where I want to start. I want to start by asking myself the question, which side has extra y's? And so there's my extra y's. So in my answer, that's where I'm going to put my extra y's. Now, what I want to write down is how many extra y's are there? So if there are 13 at the bottom and 5 at the top, that means there's 8 extra y's down here at the bottom. I just get that by subtracting. 13 minus 5. 13 minus 5 is 8. So in my answer, I'm going to put y to the 8th underneath the fraction bar, because I had extras on the bottom. I had 8 extras on the bottom, and that's what I got to put there. Now, fractions are kind of strange because you have to have something on the top of a fraction. You can't just leave it blank. And so if we have just extras on the bottom, we still have to write a 1 up here at the top. And so the answer to this question would be 1 over y to the 8th. Okay, there were 8 extras on the bottom, and so that's why I put y to the 8th at the bottom. Since there was nothing else left, I had to put a 1 at the top. So if there's nothing there, that's where we put a 1. Okay, let's try it with another one that's got a little bit more stuff going on. So here we've got x's and y's. We're going to break this problem down. We're going to look at it piece by piece. So the first question you need to ask yourself is, which side has extra x's? The top or the bottom? All right, the top has extra x's. How many extra x's do we see up here? Okay, there's 5 extra x's up here. And so we're going to take, and the reason why we know it's 5 is because we just take 19 minus 14. And so there's 5 extra x's. And so our answer, we're going to draw our fraction bar, and we're going to put 5 x's at the top. Okay, now let's do the same thing with the y's. So when you look at the y's, which side has more y's, the top or the bottom? Okay, the top does. And so my answer is going to have a y at the top. How many extra y's do I have? I have 12 at the top and 1 at the bottom. So how many extras am I going to have? Well, we would just take 12 minus 1, and 12 minus 1 is 11. Now, it's also going to be at the top because that's where the extras were at. Just like before, if there's nothing on the other side, which there isn't, I've already taken care of all the x's and all the y's, there's nothing left, I would put a 1 down here at the bottom. And you can type that in as your answer, and that's fine. Now, instead of typing it like that, since anything divided by 1 is just whatever we started with, you could just write in the answer x to the 5th, y to the 11th, and not put it over 1. So you can, if there's a 1 at the bottom, we don't have to write the bottom. But if there's not anything at the top, we do have to write the 1 at the top. So it's a little bit different rule if the empty space is at the top or the bottom. Okay, one last question here. This one has some numbers with it as well. And so again, don't forget what we did on the very first problem. The first thing we want to do is just simplify the fraction. So how would you simplify 24 over 12? Okay, we can divide them both by 12, and that would simplify to 2 over 1. And so in our fraction, in our answer, we're going to put a 2 over 1 to start with. That comes from this 24 over 12. Okay, now we want to look at the x's. So when we look at the x's, which side has extra x's? Okay, it's going to be the top. How many extras do we have on the top? Well, just 1. 8 and 7, so there's 1 extra at the top. So in our answer, we would write 1x on the top. Okay, now I want you to look at the y's. When you look at the y's, which side has extra y's? Okay, hopefully you said that the top did, because there's 6 up here and there's only 4 down here. So since there's more on the top, our answer for y is going to be at the top. How many extra y's are there up at the top? Okay, there's 2. You take 6 minus 4, and so on our answer, we would write y to the 2nd up here at the top. And so that would be our answer. Again, we don't have to write the 1 down in the bottom. If the top is empty, we have to write a 1 at the top. But if at the bottom, we don't have to write it. So we could just write our answer as 2xy squared in that one. All right, so that's what you're going to be working on today, is this idea of dividing monomials. And so, again, if you get stuck, make sure you click where it says written example or video there, and you can get a little bit of help as you're working through the assignment as well. Also, feel free to email me or get in touch with me through Canvas Messenger. But for now, this is the end of the trail. Good luck.